Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. One of our favorite things to do on this channel is to talk about the world and the stories behind the game, and apparently you've all been enjoying these videos a lot as well. So today I want to talk about Overwatch's most iconic hero, Tracer. As the poster child for the game, Tracer's face is virtually everywhere. From the box art for the game, to promotional media and banners, to her silhouette even being included in the logo for the Overwatch League, which premieres at the end of this year, Tracer is everywhere to see. We were lucky enough to take a trip to the Blizzard studios where we learned some really interesting things about the game and its heroes, and we look forward to sharing all of that with you guys in the coming weeks. However, it's finally time for us to talk about Overwatch's official mascot, Tracer, and what she could have been. To really know Tracer, we have to take a trip back to 2007. At this point in time, rumors began speculating on a new game that Blizzard was developing, which was codenamed Titan. For years, speculation was rampant across the internet. However, all anybody really knew was that Blizzard had stated it would be a completely new game and had no connections to the other three franchises within Blizzard: StarCraft, Warcraft, and Diablo. Development was quiet, and as time went on, people began wondering if the game would ever release at all or silently fade away. Blizzard would officially cease work on the project in 2013 and transition some of the team to transform it into a class-based shooter game with some of the progress that had been made on Titan. To this day, only those involved with the original project really know what Titan was meant to be. Some articles state that it was a massively multiplayer shooter set in a sci-fi near future, where players selected from certain class types and began fleshing them out in power as they leveled up through skill trees, much like a traditional MMO and much like the current shooter MMO that we have, Destiny. However, it's from these original class designs that we see Tracer emerge. In some old Titan concept sketches, we see the Jumper class. Even without color, just by looking at these sketches, we can tell that Titan was initially much more dark and gritty than the Overwatch we know today. The Jumper wields two small SMG or extended clip automatic pistols, almost similar to what Sombra seems to have with her micro Uzi type weapon. The Jumper also seems highly mechanized, and two characteristics really stand out. First off, we have the visor Jumper is wearing. The style of this visor is a design choice we see a lot with Omnics in the world of Overwatch now. It's something that's stuck with the visual progression of the world, and it still feels very familiar despite being such an old sketch. More noticeable than that, however, is what looks like the earliest iteration of Tracer's Chronal Accelerator. In this picture, it looks more like a power supply unit connected to various parts of the suit. And then there's also the knives attached at the hip. It's totally plausible that at one point in time, Tracer could have had throwing knives as an alternate fire, or potentially the melee attack would have incorporated a knife attack as well instead of being a simple punch or a hit with the pistol. However, it's possible that by throwing knives, early forms of Tracer could have had reliable sources of long-range damage, which is only mildly terrifying, and that the function of these knives would eventually be transferred to Genji and become the shurikens that he wields today as his basic attack. Now, most of the original concepts for the Jumper were of male characters, so when the team converted to Overwatch and began building a world intended for specific heroes instead of general class templates, Tracer would end up becoming a female and receiving story elements for the team to expand upon. Tracer was one of the first three heroes designed for the game alongside Widowmaker and Reaper, a hero who also has origins directly tied to Titan. In her earliest form of design, the team wanted to build her around two particular themes meshed together: a pilot and an athlete. Due to the nature of Tracer's rapid movements and dashes, the team decided it'd be important for these movements to leave outlines of her movement, or traces. These allowed the enemy to better understand her movements and where she should be, and ultimately resulted in the name that she has today. Early concepts for Tracer explored a lot of options, really. The first of these draws a lot of visual comparisons to the heroes that we have today. The pants and boots on this first sketch to the left is wearing are very reminiscent of Hanzo and Genji. While her Chronal Accelerator is present, it still seems more like a mechanical device for pilots than it does the time-controlling marvel of science that she wears today. Also, we can still see the knife strapped to her leg, meaning that even into the early development of Overwatch, the throwing knife was still a possibility for Tracer that the team was exploring, and perhaps she was even involved in the military as a pilot, and so she has that knife on as some sort of behind-the-lines tool. Now, in some of the other original concepts, we see some extremely varied designs. In one, Tracer looks to be wearing some sort of diver suit, complete with a skull cap. The dual SMGs she has are much more menacing and metallic, with no sort of character flair, and are also connected by hoses to Tracer's wrists. And yet in others, we see a more visceral theme, with large gauntlets and no visible weapon. These concepts likely would have been focused on melee attacks while utilizing high mobility to stay alive in a world rife with guns, which reminds us of another more recent hero added to the roster, Doomfist. The one in brown in particular looks almost animalistic, with a forward hunching pose, but also seems to be where the inspiration for Tracer's jacket was drawn. In this, we also see the origins of Tracer's characteristic blue traces, while other arts give it a green or yellow. Meanwhile, the one in red seems highly reminiscent of everyone's favorite, not a dwarf in the game, Torbjorn. The heavily armored red and gray scheme with interlocking plates definitely seems like it was recycled for use with Torbjorn down the line, and it almost looks like it could have come from Iron Man himself as well. Perhaps the most interesting of these original concepts, however, is the direct center. This one draws heavy inspiration from all of the others and seems to have been the most fleshed out given how much more time was invested in drawing it relative to the others. This design brings together a lot of the elements that would bring us the Tracer that we have today. The pilot's jacket is present, including the arm badge on the left side. And while not identical, the design of the forearm armor is very reminiscent of what we have in-game. However, the most telling of these has to be the slim-fitting athletic pants and the shoes. It's clear that this original sketch was the basis for developing what would become Tracer. And should Blizzard be listening, I just want to say this concept will be an amazing skin for a future event, like maybe an anniversary event, or maybe Tracer could dress up as herself for Halloween. Now, once Blizzard has nailed down a visual theme for Tracer, they began exploring exactly how her movements and actions would be displayed within the game. Early movement studies depicted her much like she is in cinematics today, a hero that dashes, jumps, backflips, and rolls across the battlefield to disorient her enemies. Work was even done to portray exactly how Tracer would move in the 4 cardinal directions as she can today. There's visual lockups for forwards, backwards, and side strafes, as well as a forward jump animation for a Tracer who blinks while jumping. At one point in time, Tracer may have even been able to vault over obstacles or terrain simply by blinking while jumping. In the end though, it's likely that despite how awesome these are, they had to be cut out for the sake of gameplay. To accurately portray these animations in a game as fast as Overwatch, it would have seriously impacted Tracer's greatest strength, the ability to outmaneuver her enemies and work the battlefield to her advantage. Now, as this design shift occurred, it became important for the team to differentiate the different abilities Tracer would be using so players could greater distinguish what was going on. Lots of time went into developing unique and visually descriptive VFX for both her blink and recall ability so that players will more easily be able to track her in combat. The most controversial progression in Tracer's design and story, however, was the decision to reveal that Tracer was a lesbian in the holiday comic of 2016. This was not a decision Blizzard took lightly, as Jeff Kaplan says, as they were entirely aware of the backlash the studio could potentially receive in response to it. The game was a global success, and was worried of potential societal views on the issue. The team wanted to make sure they presented it in a tasteful way that fit Tracer as a character and the story itself, and the primary goal was to make sure that it didn't seem as if the studio was just pandering to a group of people or merely checking off a box for the sake of forcing diversity. The comic would actually end up being banned by the federal government in Russia. However, the world as a whole seems to care less about that and more about hard carrying every match as one of Overwatch's most powerful DPS heroes in the game, who also happens to have a girlfriend. And that's how we ended up with the Tracer that we have today. From the dawn of Titan, birthed as a parkour character with a gritty space theme fitting of Junkertown, to the cheeky and spirited Tracer that we know and love today. Now, what do you guys all think about her various iterations? How heavily would the impact of something like a throwing knife or melee attacks have altered the playstyle of Tracer? And if any of these old concepts were ever to be released as a skin in the future, which would you want it to be and why? And of course, don't forget to pulse bomb that subscribe button so you can recall back for all of our newest content. Oh, please don't kill me for that. I'm really sorry, guys. You know, I'm trying not to just say please like and subscribe, and hit the notification button even, because that's apparently a thing that people are supposed to ask to do. But really, I just want you guys to enjoy the content, and if you really did enjoy it, then maybe subscribe for some more in the future. I love making these videos, and I hope that you guys love them too. Now until next time, peace.